Most people think investing is complicated. They imagine screens full of numbers, analysts in suits, and decisions made in split seconds. They believe it is a world that belongs to the experts, not to ordinary people like you and me. But what if that belief is the very thing keeping you from building real wealth? This audiobook journey is based on the ideas explored in Invested by Danielle Town, a book that grew out of a real conversation between a daughter and her father, Phil Town, a well-known investing teacher. Danielle did not start as an investor. She started as someone afraid of money, overwhelmed by the very idea of the stock market. And that is exactly why her story matters to you. What she discovered over 12 months changed everything. She learned that investing is not about reacting to market news every day. It is not about luck or insider tips. It is about understanding businesses, understanding yourself, and making calm, informed decisions rooted in real knowledge. This is a journey of 12 months, 12 chapters, and 12 powerful lessons. Each one builds on the last. Each one moves you one step closer to the kind of investor who acts with courage, clarity, and confidence. You do not need a finance degree. You do not need a large amount of money to begin. You need curiosity, patience, and the willingness to learn. So take a breath. Let us begin this journey together. Because the first step to becoming a great investor is not picking the right stock. It is becoming the right person. Chapter 1. January. Becoming brave. Fear is where most investing journeys end before they even begin. And January, the first month of a new year, is the perfect place to face that fear head on. Danielle Town did not grow up excited about money. In fact, she felt the opposite. The word investing made her feel anxious. It brought up images of confusion, risk, and loss. She had a successful life as a lawyer, but when it came to her financial future, she felt completely lost. Sound familiar? This is how most people feel. And this is where most beginners make their biggest mistake. They assume that because they feel afraid, they are not ready. But bravery in investing does not mean you stop feeling afraid. It means you begin anyway. The real lesson of January is this. You must decide, consciously and deliberately, to step into the world of investing. Not because someone told you to, not because you are chasing a hot tip, but because you understand that leaving your financial future in someone else's hands carries its own very serious risk. Think about it this way. Imagine a young professional in her early 30s. She has a steady job, some savings in a bank account, and a vague sense that she should be doing more with her money. She has been meaning to learn about investing for years, but every time she sits down to research it, the information feels overwhelming, the language feels foreign, and she closes the laptop and tells herself she will come back to it later. That later never comes. That person is losing time. And in investing, time is the most powerful force of all. Danielle's father introduced her to a concept that changes how you see everything. It is the idea that the stock market is not a casino. It is a place where you can buy small pieces of real businesses. When you buy a share of a company, you are not placing a bet. You are becoming a part owner of something real. Something that makes products, serves customers, earns money, and grows over time. This shift in thinking, from gambling to ownership, is the foundation of everything that follows. There is also something else January teaches you: the importance of your relationship with money. Most of us were never taught about money in school. We grew up with certain beliefs about it. Maybe money felt scarce in your household. Maybe you were told that wanting money was greedy. Maybe you just never thought about it at all. These invisible beliefs shape how you make financial decisions today, whether you realize it or not. This is where investor psychology begins. Before you can understand a business, you have to understand yourself. What does money mean to you? What emotions come up when you think about losing it? What stories do you tell yourself about why you cannot invest? A practical exercise for this chapter. Sit quietly for 5 minutes and write down 3 beliefs you have about money. Do not judge them, just notice them. Ask yourself where those beliefs came from. That simple act of awareness is the first step toward becoming a braver, more thoughtful investor. If you are starting today, start by accepting that discomfort is part of the process. Every great investor you admire was once a beginner, sitting exactly where you are sitting right now. January is about courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And now that you have taken that first brave step, February asks you a question that will shape your entire investing life. What do you actually know? Chapter 2. February. Defining your circle of competence. One of the most powerful ideas in all of investing is also one of the simplest. Only invest in what you understand. Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors who has ever lived, calls this your circle of competence. Danielle Town discovered this concept in February, and it permanently changed how she thought about choosing businesses to invest in. Here is what it means. Every person on Earth has a unique collection of knowledge and experience. A nurse understands hospitals, medical supplies, and patient care better than almost anyone. A software engineer understands technology companies in a way that most financial analysts never will. A person who has run a bakery understands food costs, customer loyalty, and local competition from the inside out. This personal, lived knowledge is an investing advantage. Most people ignore it completely. This is where most beginners make a critical mistake. They look at famous investors and try to copy their choices. They hear that someone bought shares in a large technology company and they rush to do the same without truly understanding what that company does, how it earns money, or why it might be worth owning. But when you invest outside your circle of competence, you are flying blind. You cannot judge whether a company is doing well or poorly. You cannot tell when the market is overreacting with panic versus when there is a real problem. You become entirely dependent on the opinions of other people, and that is a dangerous place to be. Imagine a retired teacher who has spent 30 years watching the education sector change. She has seen which types of schools attract students, which curriculum providers are trusted, and which educational technology tools actually get used versus the ones that collect dust. She has lived insight that most Wall Street analysts simply do not have. If she focused her investing research on education-related companies, she would start from a position of genuine understanding. That is the power of your circle of competence. Now, the circle does not stay the same size forever. You can grow it. Reading, research, and genuine curiosity can expand what you know and understand over time. But the key is honesty. You must be completely honest about the boundaries of what you truly know versus what you think you know. This is where investor psychology plays a deeply important role. The human brain is very good at convincing itself that it understands something it does not. We hear a few facts about a company, feel a spark of excitement, and suddenly feel like experts. Psychologists call this the illusion of knowledge. In investing, this illusion is extremely costly. The practice for February is to draw your circle. Write down the industries, sectors, and types of businesses you genuinely understand from personal experience or deep interest. These are your starting points. These are the areas where you can build real investing conviction. If you are starting today, think about your job, your hobbies, and the products you use every day. The companies behind those products are worth looking at. You already know more about them than most. Your circle of competence is your map. And in March, you are going to get your first real set of directions, because March introduces the 4 M's, the framework that will guide every investment decision you make from this point forward. Chapter 3. March. Understanding the 4 M's. Every great system has a structure. In March, Danielle Town learns the structure that sits at the heart of intelligent, principled investing. It is called the 4 M's. And once you understand it, every business in the world becomes something you can evaluate with clarity and confidence. The 4 M's stand for meaning, moat, management, and margin of safety. Together, they form a complete checklist, a filter, a way of asking 4 essential questions before you put a single unit of your hard-earned money into any company. Let us introduce each one here, and then we will explore them in much greater depth through the chapters that follow. The first M is meaning. This asks whether the business genuinely matters to you, not just financially, but personally. Do you understand what the company does? Do you believe in the value it creates for the world? Would you be comfortable owning this business long term? The second M is moat. Borrowed from the image of a castle surrounded by deep water, a moat is the competitive advantage a company has that protects it from rivals. A strong moat means competitors find it very hard to take away a company's customers, no matter how hard they try. A wide moat is the difference between a business that thrives for decades and one that disappears within a few years. The third M is management. Great businesses can be destroyed by poor leadership. A talented, honest, and shareholder-minded management team is absolutely essential. You want to own companies run by people who behave as if they personally own a large portion of the business, because often the best ones do. The fourth M is margin of safety. This is the financial cushion. Even if a company has all three of the above qualities, you should never pay too high a price for it. A margin of safety means buying a wonderful company at a price that is noticeably below its true worth. This protects you if something unexpected happens. Think of these 4 questions as a funnel. Most companies will not pass all 4. That is completely fine. The goal is not to find many companies to invest in. The goal is to find a small number of truly excellent ones and understand them deeply. Here is a real-world style example that brings this to life. Imagine a company that makes a beloved coffee brand sold in airports around the world. Millions of travelers buy their product every single day, almost out of habit, because they trust the brand, and the airports make it easy to find. The company has meaning because the product is simple to understand. It has a moat because brand loyalty is extremely powerful. The question then becomes whether the management team allocates profits wisely and whether the current price gives you a reasonable margin of safety before you buy. This is why this framework matters in real investing. It removes emotion from the equation. When the market drops and everyone panics, an investor who has run every company they own through the 4 M's filter can ask calmly, has anything changed about the meaning, moat, management, or margin of safety of this business? If the answer is no, then the drop is an opportunity, not a disaster. Most investors skip this kind of structured thinking entirely. They act on instinct, news headlines, or the advice of friends. The 4 M's replace all of that with a principled, repeatable approach. A practical step for this chapter. For any company you're curious about, write down the 4 words: meaning, moat, management, margin of safety, and try to answer each one in a few sentences using only what you already know. The gaps in your answers will show you exactly what to research next. If you are starting today, do not worry about finding perfect answers immediately. The act of asking these questions will train your mind to think like an investor, even before you have made a single trade. March gives you the framework. April takes you deep into the very first M, the one that connects your heart to your portfolio, the one that asks, does this business mean something to you? Chapter 4, April, Finding Meaning, Mission. A lot of investing advice sounds cold. Numbers, ratios, earnings reports, and forecasts. But the wisest investors in the world consistently say something that surprises beginners. They say that before anything else, you must care about what a company actually does. April is about meaning, the first of the four M's, and it goes much deeper than you might expect. Meaning, in this context, has two layers. The first layer is personal. Does this business make sense to you? Do you use its products or services? Do you understand its customers, its model, and what problem it solves in the world? If you cannot explain what a company does clearly to a 10-year-old, that is a sign you may not understand it well enough to invest in it yet. The second layer is the company's mission. Great businesses are usually built around a purpose that goes beyond simply making money. They exist to solve a specific problem, serve a specific group of people, or create a specific kind of value. That sense of mission gives the company direction, attracts talented people, and builds the kind of loyal customer base that generates consistent, growing revenue over many years. Imagine a company that makes reusable water bottles. On the surface, it sounds simple, but its mission is connected to sustainability, health, and a movement of consumers who care deeply about reducing waste. Customers do not just buy a bottle, they buy into an identity and a set of values. That emotional connection makes them likely to stay loyal, to recommend the product, and to come back for more. This is meaning working in a business at the deepest level. This is where most beginners make a subtle but important mistake. They separate their values from their investing. They say, I care about the environment in my personal life, but investing is just about returns. But Danielle Town's journey shows that this separation is both unnecessary and counterproductive. When you invest in businesses that align with your values and your understanding, you are more likely to follow them closely, hold them through difficult periods, and make informed decisions rather than panicked ones. Here is the investor psychology angle. When you own a business that means something to you, you behave differently as an owner. You read the news about it with genuine interest rather than anxious scrolling. You can tell the difference between a short-term setback and a long-term problem. You have context, and context is everything in investing. Meaning also helps you avoid what experienced investors call story stocks. These are companies that sound exciting, appear in the headlines constantly, and attract enormous enthusiasm, but whose actual business model is fragile, confusing, or unprofitable. When you demand meaning first, you naturally filter out the noise. A practical step for this chapter. Make a list of 10 businesses whose products or services you use regularly and genuinely appreciate. These are businesses you already understand at a consumer level. Now ask yourself, which ones seem to have a clear mission? Which ones do you think about not just as a customer, but with genuine admiration? Those are the ones worth researching further. If you are starting today, remember that meaning is your entry point. It is the gate you pass through before doing any financial analysis at all. And when you find a business that genuinely speaks to you, that matters to you, the rest of the research process becomes something you actually want to do. Understanding what a company means to you and to the world is essential. But meaning alone is not enough. A great company in a crowded market without protection is like a beautiful castle with no walls. That is why May is entirely devoted to the concept of building conviction and understanding the kind of competitive strength that separates good companies from truly great ones. Chapter 5. May. Building conviction. There is a difference between knowing something and believing it deeply enough to act on it. In investing, that difference is called conviction. And May is where Danielle Town begins to understand what it truly means to believe in a company. Conviction is not arrogance. It is not stubbornness. It is not the refusal to change your mind. True investing conviction is built slowly, carefully, and on a foundation of genuine research and understanding. When you have real conviction about a company, you can hold your position calmly when the market drops. You can tune out the noise of financial media. You can make decisions based on facts and principles rather than fear or excitement. But how do you build that conviction? This is where the concept of the moat becomes central. A moat, as introduced in March, is the competitive advantage that protects a great business from its rivals. But in May, you begin to truly understand what a moat looks like in practice. Because not all competitive advantages are equal. Some are wide and deep. Others are narrow and temporary. Knowing the difference is one of the most valuable skills a thoughtful investor can develop. There are several types of moats worth knowing. The first is brand strength. A company with a beloved, trusted brand can charge higher prices than competitors, attract loyal customers, and survive difficult economic periods more easily. Think of a family that always buys the same brand of cooking oil because their grandmother used it. That loyalty is nearly impossible for a competitor to break. The second type of moat comes from switching costs. When it is very difficult or expensive for customers to move to a different company, that company has enormous pricing power. Think about a hospital that has built its entire patient management system around one specific software provider. Switching to a competitor would take months, cost enormous amounts of money, and create serious risk. So they stay, and they keep paying. The third type is network effects. Some businesses become more valuable the more people use them. A messaging platform with 100 million users is far more useful to a new user than one with only 1,000. The existing users create the value that attracts more users, which creates more value. This loop is an incredibly powerful moat. The fourth type involves cost advantages. Some companies can produce their product far more cheaply than competitors due to their size, processes, location, or access to resources. This allows them to price competitively while still earning strong profits. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine a simple search engine that became so widely used that almost everyone on Earth started using it by default. Advertisers then had no choice but to buy space on that platform because that is where the eyeballs were. The more advertisers came, the more revenue the search engine earned to improve its product. The better the product, the more users came. A moat built from network effects and brand dominance simultaneously. This is why moat matters so much in real investing. A company without a moat is always at risk of being undercut, copied, or replaced. A company with a wide moat can face serious economic headwinds and still emerge intact on the other side. Building conviction also requires you to stress test your thinking. Ask yourself, what could go wrong with this business? What technology could make it obsolete? What competitor could erode its advantage? What regulation could change its economics? The investor who asks these questions before buying is far more prepared than one who only looks at the positives. This is where investor psychology becomes crucial again. We naturally love the companies we have chosen to research. We want them to be perfect. We look for evidence that confirms our initial excitement and unconsciously filter out evidence that challenges it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. And in investing, it is one of the most expensive mental habits you can have. A practical step for this chapter. For any company you are researching, write down the strongest argument against owning it. Try your hardest to convince yourself it is a bad investment. If after doing that you still feel conviction, that conviction is real. If you are starting today, focus on finding one company with a moat you genuinely understand. Do not rush. The quality of your conviction matters far more than the speed of your first investment. May is where your investing identity starts to form. You are not just learning concepts, you are developing a way of thinking. And as June arrives, that thinking is about to meet numbers for the first time. Chapter 6. June. Learning to read financial statements. June marks a turning point in the journey. Up until now, most of the work has been qualitative. Understanding what a business does, whether it has meaning, whether its moat is strong, whether its leadership is trustworthy. All of that is vital. But at some point, A business must also prove its qualities through its numbers, and that is what financial statements do. Many people feel a deep resistance at this stage. Words like balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement feel like a foreign language. But here's the truth. You do not need to become an accountant. You need to understand a handful of key ideas well enough to ask the right questions. And those ideas are far simpler than most people expect. Let us start with the income statement. This document shows how much money a company brought in over a period of time, how much it spent to operate its business, and what was left over as profit. The top line is revenue, which is the total money earned from selling products or services. The bottom line is net income, which is what remains after all expenses have been paid. A healthy business generally shows both of these growing over time. But here is something most beginners do not realize. Net income can be manipulated. Accounting rules allow companies to record certain income before cash actually arrives, or to delay recording certain expenses. This is why the second document, the cash flow statement, is so important. The cash flow statement shows the actual movement of real money in and out of the business. The most important number here is called operating cash flow. It shows how much genuine cash the company generated from running its core business. If a company shows strong profits on its income statement, but consistently weak operating cash flow, that is a warning sign worth investigating. The third major document is the balance sheet. This is a snapshot of what the company owns, called assets, and what it owes, called liabilities. The difference between the two is the company's equity, which represents the net worth of the business. A strong balance sheet typically shows far more assets than liabilities, with healthy cash reserves and manageable debt. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine two bakeries. Bakery A reports strong annual profits in its records, but when you look at its actual cash, it is constantly borrowing money to pay suppliers and keep the lights on. Bakery B reports slightly lower profits, but its cash flow is consistent and growing. It owes very little, and it has money sitting in reserve. As an investor, Bakery B is almost certainly the more trustworthy business, even though its headline profit looks smaller. This is where most beginners make a critical mistake. They focus only on profit and ignore cash flow. Real money flowing in and out of a business tells you the truth that profit numbers sometimes hide. There is also a key ratio worth understanding. It is called return on equity. In simple words, it measures how effectively a company uses the money its owners have invested in it to generate profit. A consistently high return on equity over many years is often a sign of a genuinely strong business. It suggests the company has a real competitive advantage, not just a temporary run of good luck. The investor psychology point for June is this. Numbers feel intimidating because we fear being wrong about them. We fear looking at a financial statement and missing something important. But financial literacy, like any other skill, develops with practice. The first statement you read will be confusing. The 10th will begin to feel familiar. The 50th will feel like reading a story about a business, because that is exactly what it is. A practical step for this chapter. Find the most recent annual report of a company you already admire and use. Search for its income statement and simply look at revenue and net income over the past 5 years. Ask yourself whether both numbers have grown, stayed flat, or declined. That single observation will tell you something meaningful about the business. If you are starting today, do not try to analyze every number at once. Pick one financial metric per week and learn what it means in real terms. Build your financial vocabulary slowly, and the picture will come into focus. Reading financial statements is the bridge between your qualitative belief in a company and your quantitative understanding of its health. And in July, you are going to take everything you have learned and try to answer the most important question of all. What is this business actually worth? Chapter 7. July. Determining intrinsic value. Here is the question that separates thoughtful investors from everyone else. Not, what is this company's stock price today? But, what is this company actually worth? Those two numbers are almost never the same, and the gap between them is where intelligent investing lives. July is the month Danielle Town confronts intrinsic value. This is the concept of calculating, as accurately as you reasonably can, the true underlying worth of a business, independent of what the market says about it on any given day. It is a difficult idea to grasp at first because we are conditioned to believe that price equals value. If a stock is trading at a certain number, surely that number reflects what it is worth. But markets are driven by human emotions as much as by financial reality. Fear, greed, news cycles, and social trends all push prices away from true value constantly. The goal of calculating intrinsic value is to give yourself a number to compare against the market price. If the market price is significantly lower than the intrinsic value you have calculated, that is a potential buying opportunity. If it is significantly higher, you wait. How do you calculate intrinsic value? There are several methods, and they all involve some degree of estimation. That is important to accept from the beginning. Intrinsic value is not a single perfect number. It is a range, an educated estimate, built from the best available information. One widely used approach looks at the earnings a business generates each year and asks what those earnings are worth to you as an owner over the next 10 years, bringing future earnings back to what they are worth in today's money. This approach is called discounted cash flow analysis. It sounds complicated, but the core idea is simple. A business that earns steady, growing profits over the next decade is worth more than one that earns the same amount just once. Another simpler approach involves comparing key financial ratios to historical norms for the industry. Looking at how much you are paying relative to the company's earnings or relative to the value of its assets can quickly tell you whether a price is reasonable or inflated. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine a quiet, family-owned bookshop that has been in a town for 40 years. It earns a reliable income year after year. It has no debt. Its customers are loyal. If someone offered to sell you this bookshop, you would not simply pay whatever number they named. You would think carefully about how much it earns, how likely it is to keep earning at that level, and what a fair price would be for a business like this. That thought process is intrinsic value calculation in everyday life. This is why this matters in real investing. Most people who lose money in markets are not victims of bad companies. They are victims of paying too much for good ones. A great company bought at a terrible price is still a poor investment. The investor psychology lesson in July is about patience. Calculating intrinsic value often reveals that the companies you admire are currently priced above what they are worth. That is frustrating. The temptation is to buy anyway, telling yourself the company is so wonderful that price does not matter. But price always matters. The best investors in the world wait. They watch. And they act decisively when the price finally falls to a level that makes sense. Imagine the feeling of watching a company you love for months, seeing the price remain high, and then one day waking up to news that the market has dropped and that same company is now trading 30 units below where it was. That drop, which panics most investors, is the moment a prepared investor has been quietly waiting for. A practical step for this chapter. For one company you are researching, try to estimate a simple range of intrinsic value. Look at its earnings over the past 5 years. Estimate how fast those earnings might grow over the next 10, and ask yourself what you would be willing to pay for that stream of future income. Even a rough estimate, made honestly, is far better than having no estimate at all. If you are starting today, accept that your first intrinsic value calculations will be imperfect. That is completely normal. Every great investor started the same way. What matters is developing the habit of asking the question at all. Knowing what a company is worth is powerful, but July alone does not complete the picture, because even the best calculation is built on assumptions, and assumptions can be wrong. That is why August introduces something that protects you even when your estimates fall short. Chapter 8. August. Margin of safety. If intrinsic value is the destination, then margin of safety is the cushion you build into your journey in case the road turns out to be rougher than expected. Danielle Town arrives at this concept in August, and it is perhaps the single most protective idea in all of intelligent investing. The margin of safety is the gap between the price you pay for a company and the intrinsic value you have calculated. You want to buy at a price meaningfully below that value, not slightly below. Meaningfully below. Why? Because no matter how carefully you have researched a company, there is always uncertainty. The future is never fully predictable. Revenues may grow slower than expected. A new competitor may emerge. An economic downturn may reduce consumer spending. An operational problem inside the company may take years to resolve. A margin of safety protects you in all of these scenarios. It gives you room to be wrong. The legendary investor Benjamin Graham, who was Buffett's own mentor, described this concept beautifully in his teaching. The margin of safety is the difference between what you know and what you do not know. It is intellectual humility built directly into the price you are willing to pay. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine you are buying a used car. You have done your research and concluded that a fair price for the model and condition is around $20,000 in your local currency. But the seller is asking exactly $20,000. There is no room for error. If the car has a hidden problem you did not notice, you have overpaid. Now imagine the same car being sold for $15,000. Suddenly, even if there is a small issue you missed, you have built in a buffer that protects your investment. That buffer is a margin of safety. In stocks, this concept works the same way. If you calculate a company's intrinsic value and then only buy when the market offers it to you at a significantly lower price, you have created a built-in protection layer. This is where most beginners make a fundamental error. They fall in love with a company, convince themselves it is exceptional, and then pay a premium price because they believe quality justifies any cost. But even the greatest businesses can disappoint. Even wonderful companies go through years of difficulty. And if you paid too much to own them, those difficult years will test your patience in ways that lead to poor decisions. The margin of safety concept also connects deeply to investor psychology. One of the most common emotional traps in investing is the fear of missing out. You watch a company's price rise for months. You finally buy in when excitement is at its peak. The price then falls. You panic and sell at a loss. This cycle destroys wealth. The margin of safety is partly a mathematical principle and partly a discipline that forces you to act against the emotional current. It says, wait, be patient, only buy when the price makes sense. That kind of patience is genuinely difficult. The market is constantly offering excitement. There is always something surging, always a story making headlines, always a sense that if you do not act right now, you will miss the greatest opportunity of your lifetime. The margin of safety is your anchor against all of that noise. A practical step for this chapter. For any company you are seriously considering, take your intrinsic value estimate and ask whether the current market price is at least 20 to 30% below that number. If it is not, write the company on a watch list. Set a reminder to check back in 3 months. Train yourself to associate buying not with excitement, but with value. If you are starting today, understand that your first great investment might be one you have been watching patiently for months before acting. That patience is not inaction. It is preparation. It is discipline. And it is one of the most important competitive advantages you can have over the average market participant. As summer turns to autumn, September brings a different kind of test entirely. not a question of calculation or patience, but of emotional endurance. Because September is about what happens when the market turns against you, loudly and suddenly. Chapter 9. September. Market volatility and fear. Imagine waking up one morning and checking your phone to find that the value of your investments has dropped dramatically overnight. The financial news is full of alarming words. Experts are predicting further declines. Friends and family are telling you to sell everything before things get worse. Your stomach tightens. Your mind races. You feel an urgent, almost physical need to do something. This is market volatility, and it is the moment that defines most investors, for better or for worse. September is the chapter where Danielle Town faces the emotional reality of investing, not just the intellectual framework. Because knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it when fear is flooding your system are two very different things. The first thing to understand about market volatility is that it is completely normal. Markets go up and down all the time. Drops of 10, 20, even 30% have happened many times throughout history and will happen many times again. The question is never whether the market will drop. The question is how you will respond when it does. Most people respond badly. They sell when prices are low out of fear, locking in permanent losses. Then, when confidence returns and prices rise again, they buy back in at higher prices, driven by excitement and relief. They have done the exact opposite of what intelligent investing requires. They sold low and bought high. This happens not because people are foolish. It happens because financial losses activate the same part of the brain that responds to physical danger. The brain cannot easily distinguish between a falling stock price and a genuine threat to survival. It wants you to flee, to act, to do something to make the discomfort stop. Here is a real-world style example. Think of a person who owns a house in a neighborhood that temporarily becomes less popular. The estimated value of the house, according to property indices, falls for a year or two. Does this person sell the house immediately out of panic? Of course not. They know the house is real, it has genuine value, they continue to live in it, and they understand that the estimate will likely recover. They have context, they have patience, and because the price of the house is not flashing at them on a screen every hour of every day, they do not panic. Stock market investing should feel the same way. When you own a piece of a wonderful business with a strong moat, honest management, and a price you paid carefully based on margin of safety, a market drop does not change any of those fundamental facts. The business is still earning money. The moat is still protecting it. The management is still making good decisions. The only thing that changed is what someone is willing to pay for a share of that business today. And as a long-term owner, today's price is largely irrelevant to you. The investor psychology lesson for September is about building an emotional framework in advance. The best time to decide how you will react to a market crash is before one happens. Write down your reasons for owning each company. Write down the intrinsic value you calculated. Write down the margin of safety you required. Keep these notes somewhere you can find them quickly. Then, when panic arrives, read them instead of reading the news. This is why this matters in real investing. The investors who build the most wealth over time are almost never the ones who make the cleverest predictions. They are the ones who act calmly when everyone else is acting irrationally. That calmness is not natural. It is a trained response built through preparation, education, and genuine conviction in what you own. A practical step for this chapter. Think of the last time you felt genuine financial anxiety. What triggered it? What did you want to do? What did you actually do? Understanding your own panic pattern is the beginning of changing it. If you are starting today, know that the first market drop you experience as an investor will test everything you have learned up to this point. It will feel real and frightening and urgent. And if you have done the work of the previous months, you will have the tools to meet it with clarity rather than chaos. September is not the end of the journey. It is the midpoint exam. And October takes that experience one step further, building the research habits that will serve you for a lifetime. Chapter 10. October. Research and practice. Every skill in the world deepens through practice. Cooking, writing, speaking, building. Investing is no different. October is the month Danielle Town commits to the ongoing practice of investment research. And the lesson of this chapter is that research is not a one-time task. It is a habit, a mindset, and a way of engaging with the world around you. What does investment research actually look like in practice? For many people, the word research brings to mind hours of reading dense financial documents and complex spreadsheets. And while that kind of analysis certainly has its place, the most valuable research often begins much more simply. It begins with observation. A great investor walks through the world with open, curious eyes. They notice which products people are buying and why. They ask themselves, what businesses serve daily needs so reliably that people never even think of switching? They pay attention to which brands seem to be growing in their community and which are slowly losing relevance. They listen to how people talk about the companies they interact with every day. This kind of observational research is underestimated by most beginners because it feels too simple. It does not look like serious financial analysis, but it is the starting point that many of the world's greatest investors, including Warren Buffett himself, have described as central to their process. He famously said, he invests in things so simple a ham could run them. The simplicity is the point. Simple businesses are easier to understand and easier to own with confidence. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine an investor who notices that every morning at the coffee shop near her office, the same branded oat drink is being ordered by person after person. She starts paying attention. She checks whether this brand is available in supermarkets and notices the shelf space growing. She talks to a few people about why they choose it. She learns that the brand has a strong sustainability message, a loyal following among younger consumers, and a growing distribution network. Before she has even opened a financial report, she has gathered genuinely useful business intelligence about a company worth researching further. This is where observation becomes research, and research becomes conviction, and conviction becomes action. But observation is only the beginning. The deeper level of research involves reading annual reports, earnings calls, and independent analysis with a critical eye. An annual report is a company's yearly letter to its owners. It describes what the business has done, what it plans to do, and what risks it faces. Reading several years of annual reports in sequence is one of the most powerful ways to understand how management thinks and whether they have been honest and consistent over time. There is a meaningful investor psychology lesson here. Research builds confidence, not the false confidence of someone who has skimmed a few headlines, but the genuine confidence of someone who has spent real time understanding a business inside and out. When you have done that kind of thorough research, market turbulence feels different. You are not guessing about whether your company is fundamentally sound. This is where most beginners cut corners. They read a single positive article about a company, feel excited, and convince themselves they have done enough research. But excitement is not research. Enthusiasm is not due diligence. The work of October is learning to separate genuine understanding from surface-level enthusiasm. A practical step for this chapter. Choose one company from your circle of competence. Commit to spending 2 hours reading its most recent annual report. Do not worry about understanding every detail. Simply read it as you would a story about a business. What is management saying about the future? What risks are they acknowledging? Does the tone feel honest and straightforward, or vague and defensive? If you are starting today, start your research habit with one company per month. Read its publicly available materials. Search for independent analysis. Keep a notebook of observations. Over time, this practice will build a research muscle that becomes one of your greatest investing assets. October is about building the daily discipline of learning. And as the year moves into November, that discipline is directed towards something very specific. Finding businesses so strong, so wonderfully built, that they deserve to be owned for years or even decades. Chapter 11, November, Finding Wonderful Businesses. By November, the pieces are starting to come together. You have found your courage. You have defined your circle of competence. You understand the 4 M's. You can read a financial statement. You know how to think about value and margin of safety. You have built research habits and emotional resilience. Now comes the part of the journey that feels like treasure hunting, finding wonderful businesses, not just good businesses, not just profitable ones, wonderful ones. Businesses that are so fundamentally strong, so competitively protected, and so well managed that they compound their value almost automatically over long periods of time. Businesses that, if you own them at a fair price and hold them patiently, have the potential to transform your financial life over a decade or more. What does a wonderful business look like? By November, you already know most of the answer. It has a wide moat. It has excellent management. It has growing earnings and strong cash flow. It operates in an industry you understand. It has a clear mission. And crucially, it is available at a price that gives you a meaningful margin of safety. But there is one additional quality that November highlights with special emphasis: consistency. A wonderful business is one that does not just perform brilliantly in good years. It performs reliably across many years and different economic conditions. It earns strong returns on equity consistently, not just occasionally. Its earnings grow in a steady, predictable direction. Its management makes promises to investors and then delivers on them, year after year. Consistency is the mark of a true competitive advantage. Any company can have one great year. Any company can benefit from a temporary trend or a lucky moment. But the businesses that show the same fundamental strength through recessions, through competition, through technology shifts, and through leadership changes are an entirely different category. Here is a real-world style example. Imagine two companies side by side. Company A had an extraordinary year 3 years ago, driven by a single product that caught public attention. Since then, earnings have been volatile, and management has made a series of confusing strategic decisions. Company B has never made spectacular headlines, but its earnings have grown steadily for 12 consecutive years. Its management team has been in place for a decade. Its customers renew their subscriptions at an extremely high rate. As an investor looking for something wonderful to own for the next 10 years, Company B is almost certainly the more valuable choice. Boring consistency beats exciting volatility nearly every time. This is where investor psychology plays its final major role before the end of the year. Wonderful businesses are often not the ones generating the most excitement in the market. In fact, the most talked about, most hyped, most dramatic companies are frequently the ones carrying the most risk. The businesses worth owning for decades tend to be the ones that quietly compound their value, while the financial media focuses elsewhere. Learning to feel comfortable with boring is one of the most valuable psychological shifts an investor can make. It requires letting go of the excitement of chasing the latest story and embracing the quiet discipline of owning genuine quality. It requires trusting the process over the headlines. November also invites you to think about concentration versus diversification. Many people believe that spreading money across hundreds of investments automatically makes them safe. But an investor who owns 20 businesses they do not truly understand is not protected. They are simply widely confused. A focused portfolio of 5 to 10 deeply researched, genuinely wonderful companies bought at fair prices is far more powerful than a scattered collection of guesses. A practical step for this chapter. Review your research list from October and ask this question about each company. Would I be comfortable if the stock market closed for 5 years and I simply had to wait? If the honest answer is yes, that business is a candidate for your wonderful company list. If the honest answer is no, ask yourself why. The reason will reveal something important about what you still need to understand. If you are starting today, know that finding one truly wonderful business to understand deeply is a complete achievement for a first-year investor. Quality of understanding matters infinitely more than quantity of positions. November is almost the end of the year, and December is not just a closing chapter, it is an arrival, a transformation. It is the moment the learner becomes something new. Chapter 12. December. Becoming an investor. There is a specific moment in every journey when you stop being someone who is learning to do something and start being someone who does it. Not perfectly, not without doubt, but genuinely, authentically, from a place of earned understanding. December is that moment. December is where Danielle Town looks back at the 12 months she has traveled and realizes that something fundamental has changed, not just in what she knows, but in who she is. She began January afraid of numbers, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of the very idea of being responsible for her own financial future. And she arrives in December as someone who has faced those fears, worked through the confusion, built real knowledge, and made real decisions based on real research. She is an investor. What does it mean to truly become an investor? It does not mean you have made a fortune. It does not mean you have all the answers. It does not mean the market has been kind to you or that every decision has gone perfectly. It means you have developed a relationship with businesses, with money, and with your own psychology that is grounded, principled, and independent. You now think about companies differently. When you use a product you love, you find yourself wondering how the business behind it actually earns its money. When the market drops, you no longer feel the pull of panic in the same way because you understand what you own and why you own it. When someone at a dinner party tells you about an exciting investment opportunity, you have a framework for evaluating it rather than simply responding to the excitement. This shift is not small. In a world where most people outsource their financial decisions entirely or make them based on emotion and headlines, the investor who thinks clearly and acts deliberately holds an enormous long-term advantage. But December also comes with a powerful reminder. Becoming an investor is not a destination, it is a beginning. The knowledge you have built over 12 months is a foundation. The habits you have developed are practices to continue. The emotional discipline you have trained is a muscle to keep exercising. Great investors never stop learning. They continue reading, researching, questioning their assumptions, and revising their views when evidence demands it. Here is a real-world style example. Think of a craftsperson who has spent a year learning woodworking. By December, they can build a table from scratch. They understand wood types, joinery, finishing, and design. Are they a master? Not yet. But they are genuinely a woodworker. They have crossed the threshold from complete beginner to someone with a real foundation of skill. Everything they build from this point forward will be informed by that foundation, and they will continue learning with every project they take on. Investing is exactly the same. The 12 months in this book are your apprenticeship. Your ongoing investment life is where that apprenticeship grows into mastery. The investor psychology lesson of December is about integration, taking everything you have learned and making it part of how you naturally think and behave. Not keeping investing as a separate, effortful activity, but allowing it to become part of how you see the world. A lens that you carry with you, quietly improving every financial decision you make for the rest of your life. There is also something deeply personal in December. Danielle's journey was not only about money, it was about trust. Trust in herself. Trust that she was capable of understanding complex things. Trust that her own knowledge and instincts had real value. Many of us underestimate our own intelligence when it comes to money. We have been conditioned to believe that finance belongs to specialists and that we should simply hand our futures over to someone else. This book and this journey is a powerful argument against that belief. You are capable of understanding the businesses that make up the economy. You are capable of evaluating them carefully and making informed decisions. You are capable of building a financial future rooted in genuine knowledge rather than guesswork or delegation. A practical step for this chapter. Write a short letter to yourself from where you are now. Describe what you have learned, what you still want to understand, and what kind of investor you intend to become. Seal it and open it in 12 months. You will be surprised how far you have come. If you are starting today, know that the best investment you will ever make is the investment in your own financial education. Every hour you spend genuinely learning compounds just like the interest in a great business. Slowly at first, then powerfully, then in ways that reshape your entire future.